Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Helper.
I'm Mary Matte. Thanks so much for being here. Our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. On this week's show, we'll be speaking to the one and only Chris Hedges on the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. Now, it's one thing to oppose political violence, to oppose the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and to mourn the dead and to lament the loss for his loved ones. It's another thing, though, to exploit the murder to basically advocate political repression, as Charlie Kirk's allies in the Trump administration are doing. So we'll be talking to Chris Hedges about that and a whole lot more.
Yeah, and definitely make sure that you become members if you're not already at usefulidiotspodcast.com, because you're definitely going to want to see, in addition to our weekly dose of media madness, that is the Thursday Throwdown segment, you're definitely going to want to see the full interview with Chris Hedges.
All right, let's get to our four basic food groups. What do we have for Democrats Suck?
So for Democrats Suck, let's take a listen to Fox News. To be fair, Fox News' presentation of the way some Democrats view capitalism and economic hardship. So here we're going to hear from first Pramila Jayapal and AOC, and then we're going to hear from the great Democrat, that is John Fetterman.
Capitalism is taking a nosedive. Just 54% of the public now has a favorable view of capitalism. Now, that's the lowest Gallup has ever measured. You could probably guess which party is causing the slide. You got it right. Only 42% of Democrats view capitalism favorably.
Okay, so that's an interesting kind of extrapolation that the Democratic Party are causing people to have a unfavorable view of capitalism. I don't think that's how it works. People are viewing capitalism with increased criticism because of the lives that they live, not because some politician is telling them to do it.
Yeah, I wish it could be true that, Bernie Sanders' message is catching on, that capitalism is failing people and we should have health care for all. But I don't think that Bernie Sanders is that effective. I think actually it could just be good old lived experience.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happens is you have someone like Bernie Sanders who taps into that. I mean, it's a bit of a symbiotic thing, right? You have people who believe this. It's not a radical idea. Media and political elites pretend it's a radical idea. And then you have people like Bernie Sanders and others who say, no, this isn't a radical idea. And that gives people, I think, more kind of courage to speak openly about it. But yeah, the idea that it's like some intellectual decision as opposed to lived experience and being at the brunt of capitalism is absurd, but it's very Fox News-ish.
66% have a positive view of socialism. Of course, the squad is egging on the Marxist revolution.
What it's about is the corruption and the rigging of the economy by the wealthiest few. I think most people in this country wouldn't mind if people made wealth, but if it's made at the expense of others.
There has to be a way where we can all be compensated in a way that allows us to live and feed our kids.
What a radical idea from AOC.
I know.
We should all be compensated in a way that allows us to feed our children. Where's the gulag? You know what I mean? The gulag's right around the corner here.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell the difference between her and Karl Marx. I honestly don't know which one is speaking.
You feel like you've inherited this world that I don't even know how a lot of people even make it.
Notice, by the way, two words that don't appear in either of their comments. One starts with C and one starts with S. So they don't actually mention capitalism or socialism, which is an interesting clip if you're trying to make the point that they're egging on their followers to support socialism and oppose capitalism. I guess maybe they're like giving some secret hand signals that we can't see, or maybe there's some coded language that we don't understand, but it's code for socialism good, capitalism bad. Not that I think either of those things are bad things to say, but it's just funny that this is like Fox News doing exposing these people, and they can't find a single quote where they mention capitalism or socialism. But don't worry, guys, because if that is too pro-socialism for you and too anti-capitalism for you, boy, are you going to be glad to hear from this next guy.
But bring in John Fetterman, a voice of reason, trying to snap his party out of the socialist trance.
I literally was in a former communist nation. And I asked that. I said, some people in my party, some of the lefties are talking about socialism now. What do you think? He's like, that's the worst thing ever. You would never want to live here. I've lived through that kind of a thing. You know, you're going to need a reality check if you ever adopt any of those things. You know, like, you are morons. It's like, it was a nightmare for us.
Okay, I like the idea that he is effectively trying to snap people out of the quote unquote socialist trance. Like, do people actually think that he's a good spokesperson for, I would say, for anything, honestly? And that's not a stroke related attack. I just think he's never really been that persuasive since he's become kind of right wing. Now, maybe there's a correlation with the stroke, but I'm not attacking him for having had a stroke. I know a lot of people who had strokes who keep their politics logical. I will say, though, that those more populist, not even populist, I mean, they're just like common sense, pro people in general, not totally pro corporation at the expense of people. Those are sentiments he campaigned on. But I think maybe once he became a super Zionist, he had to suck on every other issue too.
He doesn't name the former communist country that he went to, where he was told by one guy that socialism doesn't work. But, assuming it's in the former Soviet Union, and are we still doing this thing where because the Soviet Union was a totalitarian system, that means you cannot possibly have any alternative to capitalism? Like, there are many people in this country you could talk to and say, yeah, the system doesn't work for me either. If you don't have healthcare, you don't have housing, you can't find a decent job, or even if you have a job and it doesn't pay a livable wage. So this whole thing of like finding people who've lived under Soviet style communism and then say, oh, well, therefore, there's nothing more to see here. This is the system we all have to accept. It's so silly.
Aaron, tell me that capitalism is the best system. Tell me that right now.
Capitalism is the best system.
No, it's not, you moron. Now you can go and report that you spoke to someone. There we go.
That could be my tour. I could just tour off of that. I was told by someone who lives under free market capitalism that it's not the best system. So there we go.
All right. What do we got for Republican suck?
For Republican suck, look, I usually avoid playing clips of Donald Trump because it's just such low-hanging fruit. But this one I think deserves our attention because he's going after a guest we've had on our show and an organization we always feature because they do such wonderful work. That's Code Pink and Medea Benjamin, who recently confronted Trump in a Washington, D.C. restaurant and basically comparing him to Hitler because he's presiding over the genocide in Gaza. And Trump did not like what he was told. So here he is now talking about Code Pink.
And a woman, in many cases, women, you can see they're professional agitators. I had one the other night. I had 4 the other night, all in one group, total phonies. I started to scream when I got into a restaurant, something with Palestine. And I said, well, I'm doing a great job for peace in the Middle East. I should get lots of awards for that, right? With the Abraham Accords and everything else. But a woman just stood up and started screaming. And she got booed out of the place, too. There were a lot of people in the restaurant. I went there to show how safe, and it was safe. I mean, the woman is just a mouthpiece. All she was a paid agitator. And you have a lot of them. And I've asked Pam to look into that in terms of RICO, bringing RICO cases against it, criminal RICO, because they should be put in jail. What they're doing to this country is really subversive.
There's so many things here. First of all, the idea that he thinks it's a knock on Code Pink that the patrons of a really fancy steakhouse booed them as if they're representative of broader society when it's all just basically a restaurant full of people who love Trump and who are elite. And then, of course, at the very beginning where he highlights the fact that these are all women, it's on top of his bigotry toward Palestinians and his complete warmongering, the fact that he can preside over a genocide and claim that he deserves accolades for bringing peace to the Middle East because of the Abraham Accords, which are just this giant scam to sideline Palestinian rights. But he goes out of his way to single out the fact that they're all women. So he can't also help but flash his misogyny.
Right. I know. So bizarre. I mean, shout out to Nancy Pelosi, who said similar things. I think didn't this come up the other day that she accused, I guess because everyone likes to accuse people of being foreign agents, but she did accuse protesters of being potentially paid by China.
What she said was early on in the Gaza genocide, the people calling for a ceasefire, they were relaying Putin's message, and she was wondering if they were paid. So yeah, Donald Trump is parroting her talking points too, and he's also doing what Nancy Pelosi did, which is calling for an investigation. So he's talking about maybe bring RICO charges against Code Pink,
which is what RICO charges are, what you bring against the mafia.
But they've been trying to go after Code Pink for a while because Code Pink also regularly, disrupts congressional hearings. And there's been talk about banning Code Pink from the Capitol, although they haven't been able to do that, I think, because of the law and free speech rights in this country, which, of course, Trump wants to take away.
Well, for Isn't That Weird, let us now turn to the great Senator Ted Cruz, who's speaking to Caitlin Collins on CNN about the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson. Now, Ted Cruz is going to say some really interesting things. I actually don't want to set it up too much. Let's just hear what he says about the bullet casings that were found.
Yeah, as Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, just said, right now they don't have any evidence of an organization. Obviously, they're still looking into this. But on the bullet casings, I don't remember there being a transgender one on there. I remember him saying there was one that said, if you can read this, you're gay. It was referencing internet memes. But on what you just said there about investigating,
there is. Hold on a second, Caitlin. There is a transgender
if there is funding.
One. Hold on, Caitlin. Caitlin, there is a transgender. There's a reference to. Do you see my bulge, which is, I'm told, is an online meme for transgenderism? And Director Patel testified that the murderer here was living with his romantic partner, who was a transgender man transitioning to being a woman. And
so, I mean, honestly, I kind of just wanted to play that clip because it was very entertaining to hear Ted Cruz say that. Do you see my bulge? But the truth is that apparently, and I don't know about this stuff, but apparently that's a reference, if anything, to online furry subculture, not transgender subculture. So he's got to get his subcultures and memes straightened out. But yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. They're trying so hard to tie this to some kind of transgender agenda. Transgender. I just made up that word, transgender.
Look, this is where, to our loyal audience, we have to acknowledge our shortcomings. We're not up on meme culture, furry memes, other memes, video game memes. So this is not we're not gonna be your one-stop shop for memification explanations here. So you have to go elsewhere. But yes, it is very funny to hear Ted Cruz repeat this and then assume this is evidence of a whatever it means, a transgender ideology.
Right. Yeah. By the way, I am very happy that apparently there were some references to Bella Ciao, which is a great anti-fascist anthem. And I am so happy to learn that it's a gamer reference. It really, because my mom was freaking out. She's very upset about that. We were very upset when we learned the Bella Ciao evidence, but thank God it's not an anti-fascist thing in this context. Not that it's stopping them from pretending that this is an avowed leftist, but that's what they're going to do. What do we got for terrible?
For that terrible, remember the whole thing with TikTok where the Biden administration teamed up with a bipartisan coalition in Congress to basically try to shut down TikTok because TikTok was letting the kids see the wrong thing, namely images of the Gaza genocide that Biden and Congress were supporting. So apparently now we finally reached a good old-fashioned compromise where the U.S. is going to force the owner of TikTok, which is in China, ByteDance, to sell to a new coalition. And let's take a look at TikTok's lucky new owners. TikTok buyers to include Oracle, Silver Lake, and Andreessen. So who is Oracle and Andreessen? Well, that's a reference to Oracle, which is owned by Larry Ellison, mega billionaire who just got his son to buy CBS News, which his son is then going to turn over apparently to Barry Weiss of the famine-denying so-called free press. And Andreessen, and that is a firm that is co-run by Ben Horowitz. And who is Ben Horowitz? He's the son of the late neocon pro-Israel fanatic David Horowitz. So basically, don't worry, Israel supporters. TikTok will soon be in safe hands, and the kids will no longer be able to share and see images of the Gaza genocide that our tax dollars are supporting, thanks to the good old-fashioned free market, which in this case involves the U.S. government interfering in the free market and saying you cannot operate as a company because you're undermining our support for Israeli genocide. So that is the result of the whole TikTok controversy.
Wow. Well, good job. Good job, Zionists.
And as we're going to talk about with Chris Hedges in today's interview, Larry Ellison is not just buying up TikTok and CBS News. He's also now trying to launch a bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns CNN. So if we're lucky enough, everybody, in the wonders of our free market system, right, where just like the most entrepreneurial people manage to succeed and the best ideas win, a pro-Israel fanatic will be controlling TikTok, CBS News, and maybe even CNN as well.
Wonderful news.
All right, for a bonus, isn't that terrible? I want to talk about Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders just belatedly acknowledged for the first time that what Israel is doing in Gaza is a genocide after he long disputed that characterization. But there's been so many experts. The UN Commission of Inquiry on Palestine just became the latest. There are many more human rights groups, including inside Israel, that have called this a genocide. So Bernie Sanders finally has come out with a statement calling it a genocide. And, look, I do say better late than never. And I do appreciate the efforts that Bernie Sanders has made to stop the genocide. He tried to push through measures in Congress to block arms sales to Israel. That's a good thing, and he deserves credit for that. But what is terrible here about this, to me, is that on top of just being very late to the game, which, whatever, like I can let that slide, he's still parroting the Israeli propaganda that is used to wage the genocide. And I want to read some of it. This is the beginning of Bernie Sanders' statement. Hamas, a terrorist organization, began this war with its brutal attack on October 7th, which killed 1,200 innocent people and took 250 hostages. Israel, as any other country, had a right to defend itself from Hamas. So even in this very short passage, you have a number of just factual mistakes. First of all, on October 7th, it's worth stressing, the death toll was not 1,200 innocent people killed by Palestinian militants. This is actually a doubly false statement. First of all, not all of those 1,200 were civilians who are innocent. Hundreds of them were soldiers enforcing a brutal occupation and siege of Gaza. So you can oppose their killing if you want to, but you can't say they're just innocent people, just bystanders. No, they're enforcing a siege of Gaza, and people under siege, people under military occupation have the right to resist. So they're combatants. They're not innocent civilians. Now, what makes this doubly false is the fact that not all these 1,200 people were killed by Hamas. Right. We know, because this has been confirmed by witnesses and by Israeli media as well, that Israel enacted the Hannibal Directive and killed some of its own people. We don't know how many, because Israel's allowed no independent investigation. But we know that Israel killed at least some of its own people. So Bernie Sanders' statement there about the death toll is doubly false. He's also wrong, I think, just when it comes to substance, in saying that Hamas began this war. You can only say that if you ignore the decades of military occupation, ethnic cleansing, massacres, and siege that precede October 7th, which is what Israel did to the Palestinians, especially in Gaza. And if you ignore that history, only by ignoring the history can you then claim that Israel had the right to defend itself from Hamas. Because no, actually, if you're imposing a decades-long military occupation and brutal siege, you don't have the right to defend yourself against people who are resisting that occupation. You have the obligation to end the occupation and the siege. Now, that doesn't mean Israel didn't have the right to repel the attacks on October 7th, right? If your innocent people are being attacked, sure, you have the right to defend them. But this idea that Bernie's still endorsing that Israel has the right to go in and bomb Gaza to prevent another October 7th and defend itself from Hamas, no. If you're an occupying power, your obligation is to end the occupation. So what's terrible here about Bernie is that even in his belated recognition of the genocide, and even for all the laudable things he does to try to stand up to genocide, he still props up the propaganda of Israel as it wages that genocide. And that is what is terrible still about Bernie Sanders' statements. And whoever is writing them for him, I really hope that they see this and can rethink the wisdom of what they're putting out there. Because honestly, I think it'd be better if he just said nothing than saying stuff like this.
What about if he just said, yes, it's genocide. Have a good day.
Well, yeah, exactly.
You can hire us, Bernie.
Ali Abunimah had a really concise response to this, summarizing Bernie's argument. And this is what Ali said. Bernie Sanders, TLDR, yes, it was a Holocaust, but the Jews started it. And that's right. Bernie's still blaming Palestinians for the genocide that he's only now belatedly acknowledging.
That is true, and those are powerful words from Ali Abunimah. I don't think, though, he'll be hired by Bernie. Ali, if you're watching this, I just don't want to get your hopes up.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe bet. And those have been your 4 basic food groups. For this week's interview, we are joined by Chris Hedges. He is a Pulitzer-winning journalist who writes at chrishedges.substack.com. And we couldn't think of anyone better to help us make sense of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the aftermath of the Trump administration exploiting that murder to expand domestic repression here at home.
Indeed. And you can also check out his really great piece called The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk on his Substack.
All right, let's go to Chris Hedges. Chris Hedges, thank you for joining us.
Sure, Aaron.
You, in my opinion, are the leading chronicler of America's slide toward authoritarianism, which you often tie to the fact that it's a global empire. And you talk about the connections between being a hegemon and the fueling of an internal decay. So in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, where you're seeing the Trump administration exploit it to call for an even harsher crackdown on its domestic opponents, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as you're well aware, I spent 20 years covering disintegrating societies all over the globe. El Salvador, 7 years in the Middle East, countries like Iraq, of course, the war in the former Yugoslavia, not to mention the apartheid state of Israel. So that kind of deterioration and disintegration is intimately familiar to me. And so, of course, as soon as Kirk was assassinated, he was elevated within the canon of his movement to the status of a martyr. That was instant. I mean, even before they had apprehended Robinson as the suspect, you had Trump declare him a martyr. You had flags lowered at half-mast. He was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom instantly. And I've watched this before in other conflicts, and it's very dangerous because the martyr is really the lifeblood of radical movements in this sense. They use the martyr. Everyone does. You know, there was a very famous Russian revolutionary who was killed in the 1905 the Tsarist regime managed to crush it. It was kind of the dress rehearsal for the 1917 revolution. I forget his name, but he became the martyr in the same way that this Nazi thug host Wiesel became, and then you had the host Wiesel song. But that's true in everywhere. It was true in Yugoslavia. It's true everywhere. True in El Salvador. So I knew instantly what was happening. And the martyr is any kind of collaboration, any kind of dialogue, any kind of compassion with the opposing movement or opposing group is a betrayal of the martyr. It's a betrayal of the sanctity of the martyr. It is to essentially collaborate with people who, through the eyes of the radical movement that you're in, have kill the martyr. And that's, of course, precisely what's happening. I mean, it's really frightening. All of this rhetoric by J.D. Vance and Miller and others, this is not hyperbolic. They are deadly serious, and they will use the death of Kirk they are using the death of Kirk to essentially sanctify this crusade against what is left of our open society. And just to add, finally, I look at it as kind of three different phases. The first being attacking people who oppose the genocide, in particular students, as anti-Semitic. And of course, just anecdotally, 20 or 30% of them are Jewish, to shut down free speech. And the universities completely capitulated. Then you saw the demonization of migrants, of undocumented people as criminals. I mean, of course, it's insane. These people work 14 hours a day and earn about $12,000 a year. And I mean, but that became the mechanism to create ICE, which, if anyone thinks that these detention centers that will soon dot the American landscape are there exclusively for migrants or undocumented, they're extremely naive. It is normalizing a secret police force. I mean, when I saw that, remember that Tufts student who was snatched, and let's be clear, she was here legally, snatched for writing an op-ed piece in her university newspaper. That I saw that in Pinochet's Chile. I was in demonstrations opposing the dictatorship, and these cars, unmarked cars, would come up. These guys would jump out with the balaclava, their faces covered, didn't identify themselves, would grab people in the crowd, push them in the car, and Who knows where they were held or where they went, or, in some cases, if they, you never saw them again. I also lived, by the way, at the end of the dirty war in Argentina. So, and then this final phase is we're blaming primarily liberal. When they talk about left, they really mean liberal institutions, although, of course, those of us on the left are not going to be immune. There isn't much of a left, of course, in the United States. But they will be demonized, they are being demonized for the killing of Kirk, and they will be shut down. And so in each case, you have this fantasy peddled, anti-Semitism, rampant crime by undocumented or migrants, and then the empowering of people to carry out hate crimes, like the hate crime that was carried out against Kirk. So I've seen it all before, and that's what's so chilling. And I think other people who come out of collapsing societies also see it, and all of us are just really spooked.
So you talked about the sanctification of Charlie Kirk when it comes from the right, but I'm curious what you think of it when it comes from the liberal side. I'm not sure to what extent this is a trend, but Ezra Klein, who is a prominent liberal columnist for the New York Times, the paper of record, he wrote an article called "Charlie Kirk Was Practicing Politics the Right Way," and basically saying that, you can disagree with Charlie Kirk, but he was doing things the right way. He was going to college campuses, holding good faith debates, and trying to use the power of persuasion.
Well, that's why I don't read Ezra Klein. That's ridiculous. Charlie Kirk was fomenting the kind of hate and demonization. I mean, let's begin with the kinds of things he said about Muslims, the kinds of things he said about people of color, in particular Black people, the kinds of things he said about the LGBTQ community, the kinds of things he said about feminists. This was really vitriolic hate speech. And it is like all hate speech, giving license to people to act upon that hate speech. So, I mean, one of the things, look, I like all of us, I mean, when I heard about the assassination, I was appalled and horrified, not because I have any love for Kirk, I don't, but because I know how it would be weaponized. Right. And in all totalitarian states, vigilante groups are vitally important, and they serve this strange purpose of, at once in the formal structures of power, they have a kind of deniability because it's not them, it's one step removed. On the other hand, the vigilante group carries out a lot of the dirty work that whatever, police state or totalitarian state wants carried out. And we have all sorts of vigilante groups, and we have to count groups, these paramilitary groups that Eric Prince, you've got this, they've been in the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They recruit from these white Aryan biker groups. They're very, very frightening. And so Kirk was part of that. And let's be clear, I mean, these people reap a lot of money from it. I mean, and of course, he apparently had a break with his Zionist donors at the end. And Max has done a good job of reporting that. But he was a shill for for the genocide and the apartheid state for a long time. And of course, had a massive budget of about $80 million a year. I get this from Max. And was really created. Many of these figures, like Rubio, we forget Tony Blair, they are total creations of Zionist money. And he was too. And Bari Weiss is, and these groups. So I don't understand. I mean, I'm not a liberal. I was cured a long time I used to live when I went to Harvard Divinity School, I lived in a housing project or across the street from a housing project in Roxbury. I would then commute for my classes into Cambridge, listening to classmates talk about empowering people they never met. And I always say Harvard's where I learned to hate liberals. I think that column that you just cited is kind of an example of how utterly clueless people like Ezra Klein and liberal class are, not only about Kirk, but about this moment in American history.
Well, you'll be happy to know that after writing about how great Kirk was and did politics the right way, Ezra Klein then went on to have Ben Shapiro on his podcast.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I know you kind of can't make it up. Yeah. So,
there you go.
Yeah, thank you for showing and not just telling, Ezra. I wanted to know about something that you said in this great piece that you wrote at your Substack. It's called "The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk." And you write, history has shown what comes next. It won't be pleasant. Kirk, elevated to martyrdom, gives those seeking to extinguish our democracy the license to kill, just as Kirk was killed. It lifts what few constraints still exist to protect us from state abuse and vigilante violence. Kirk's name and visage will be employed to accelerate the road to tyranny, which is as he would have wanted it. And I want you to elaborate on that last part, which is as he would have wanted it, because there is a kind of debate now, and the space of what Kirk would have wanted is being kind of contested. You have some people who are saying that he was a free speech champion. Then you have some people saying that, no, he wasn't, and he wanted crackdowns on speech. And then you have some people who are saying, well, he was just a hypocrite and all over the place. So can you talk about this side of him that you say would have been happy with what's happening right now in response to his killing?
Well, I find this effort to promote him as a free speech champion just ridiculous. He had what is Professor Watch and City Council Watch. This was about outing, and he worked closely with the Canary Mission, which of course doxes all sorts of people on college campuses. No, I mean he definitely was not about liberty and not about free speech. He comes out of this cabal like Miller and Vance and others. So no, he was not a champion of free speech. He did his little dog and pony show where he'd go around to campuses and people would come up to supposedly debate him. I don't consider those debates. And then, he would take clips of it if he did well and ignore the clips when he didn't. That's show business. I mean, and many of these people are in show business. I spent 2 years covering the Christian right, spent a lot of time in these mega churches, and these people are just, updated versions of P.T. Barnum, which is really what he was, what he is, was. So, I think that's just a complete misreading of his own. He's a very public figure. I mean, the statements are very public. But the idea that he was engaged in free speech. I mean, totalitarian movements, Hannah Arendt writes about this, are always happy to play by the system until they don't have to. They'll play by the system, and then when they have enough power, they'll flick the switch and the system will go dark, which is exactly the moment we're in.
And you just mentioned earlier in this conversation, you said that Charlie Kirk was the victim of a hate crime.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that
point?
Well,
okay, we don't know the motive, but I mean, sure. I consider killing anyone for their political beliefs a hate crime. Let's put it that way. I find everything he stood for repugnant, of course, and have spent my whole life fighting against it and the positions he espoused and people like him who espouse it. But political assassination, no matter who carries it out, is a hate crime.
And what do you make of the fallout on the right now when it comes to the issue of Israel? You mentioned Max Blumenthal's reporting at the Gray Zone. He spoke to a number of sources who told him that Charlie Kirk was shifting a little bit on Israel, that he had had some unpleasant experiences with pro-Israel donors, including Bill Ackman, pressuring him to essentially stop platforming people like Tucker Carlson, who have been critical of Israel. And Charlie Kirk was insisting that he was going to keep on giving space to people like Tucker Carlson. And there's been some buzz now around, the issue of Israel on the right and how, the Trump administration is so completely beholden to the Israeli agenda, and how, Charlie Kirk, whether it's accurate or not, is being upheld now as sort of a voice of dissent on that. And there's been a lot of debate over it. Like, what do you make of that?
I find it really fascinating. I mean, what Max reported on it was kind of nascent. It was beginning. We had not actually broken with Israel, and of course, Max did two stories that I read. The second one being Bill Ackman, dressing him down. And of course, the Zionist lobby has all sorts of ways to shut him down. The big one is pulling the plug on the money, which apparently they were threatening to do. So, I mean, I find that interesting. I think Max is, from what I read from his story, was saying that it was Charlie Kirk was responding to his base. And of course, the polling numbers bear that out, that even among young Republicans, they've had enough. I mean, how long can you watch a live stream genocide and not get sick to your stomach? Yeah. So Charlie was responding to this huge turning away from Israel across the political spectrum. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, actually came out. And so, and the Zionist lobby was not happy, not surprisingly. But they didn't need to kill him. I mean, they have lots of ways to turn the spigot off and make life really uncomfortable. And then, of course, the other thing they do is carry out character assassination. And they've got a very compliant media as an echo chamber. I am good friends with Norman Finkelstein. His entire academic career has been characterized by this sustained assault by the Zionist lobby against him. Right. And they are just unrelenting. So, but yeah, I found that really, really fascinating point.
So let's actually play two clips featuring Charlie Kirk, and you'll see some evolution on the issue of Israel. Here he is speaking at an event in Arizona, making a very disgusting joke about gay people in Gaza.
So, it's funny. I used to say that, hey, if you as a gay person would go to Gaza, they'd throw you off of tall buildings, right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't...
When you mess with the bull, you get the horns.
Is that too soon? I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
And here is Charlie Kirk a few days before he was killed, speaking to Ben Shapiro.
Charlie, we've pushed back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border. So maybe we should also ask a question. Is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of years. So, Ben, some people would accuse Israel of wanting to ethnically cleanse. Some people in the Israeli government are saying, again, it's all over the place, right?
So you can see the shift. I mean, nowhere is he talking about the humanity of Palestinians, right? We should be clear. But you do see him perhaps catering to a base that is not happy with the alleged America First president being so beholden to Israel.
Yeah, he's at the same time, he's not condemning the genocide. So,
of course, right. Exactly.
Yeah, so let's be clear. I mean, but it is a shift. And I'm sure for Zionists and their supporters, it was a very frightening shift.
As you can see in the, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Ben Shapiro's eyebrows go up about 5 feet when he mentions that.
I can guarantee you that they have poured a lot of money into making sure that Ben Shapiro is in the running to replace Charlie Kirk.
Right. It is amazing watching people so overtly weaponize, like his body isn't even cold, and they're so overtly weaponizing his death.
Well, as Max pointed out, Netanyahu has tweeted 6 different times about Kirk, which is kind of overkill. I mean, there's something happening there.
Yeah. Well, now that he's dead, he gets to pretend that that's why he's not visiting Israel, right? So
I remember the first day I went into the post office and saw a stamp with Malcolm X on it. Almost fell over.
Right.
Once you're dead, they own you.
Yeah, exactly.
I teach in a prison, and they have Malcolm X quotes on the wall in the prison classrooms, but none of them are. All of them are like, the equivalent of education is good or something.
Right. Yeah. He is the unintentional poster child for prison rehab.
Well, most of my students are Muslim, and they come to Islam through Malcolm Speaks, through that book. Yeah. I mean, I worship Malcolm as a political figure, as a prophet, but yeah, he's been completely, in the same way King has been frozen in 1960. King also had a radical side to him. Right. And Cornell did a good book, The Radical King, but he's frozen in when was the I Have a Dream speech? 64, I think. Yeah, 63, I can't remember.
Yeah. Definitely don't talk about his Vietnam speech.
They don't talk about they don't talk about his huge shift in the war on poverty, in essence, and that racism will never end until economic. And then that's when all the white liberals went for the exit.
Let's go to Attorney General Pam Bondi. In the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, she argued that there is now a distinction between free speech and hate speech, and she vowed to go after people who she says in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder are practicing what the Trump administration deems to be hate speech.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
And I do have to add that though I think he was an opportunist and inconsistent, it is interesting because Charlie Kirk said there's no hate speech.
Well, but it's also how they define hate speech.
Sure.
All these people who were losing their jobs, and they didn't actually engage in hate speech. They dared to criticize the sanctified martyr. They didn't justify the killing. I mean, there may have been people who did it, but I mean, most of these people who've lost their jobs opposed his Islamophobia and his racism and his homophobia and everything else. But that is, of course, becomes, in the eyes of a totalitarian regime, hate speech. You look at any totalitarian society. I actually covered the end of the Stasi state in East Germany, and you couldn't make jokes. I mean, jokes, well, so it's true for Stalin or anyone else, or Hitler, but Honecker, too, the communist dictator in East Germany, the Stasi would come haul you out and lock you up for making jokes about Honecker. So that is where we're headed, where the way they define hate speech is anything that is not totally subservient and reverential towards the figures of authority and the people that they hold up, like Kirk, as they're kind of lodestars that we all have to follow.
Yeah, and he said hate speech, so Kirk said hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free.
Well, that's because he engaged in it. He engaged in hate speech, which
right.
I mean, under the First Amendment, he can do. I mean, as long as you're not. So he's right about that. But this, again, is part of the duplicity of the right, that they sanctify or they hold up as sacrosanct the First Amendment while they use it. Exactly. And then once in power, they shut it down, which is exactly what we're watching right now.
Yeah, it's also fascinating to watch the way the media rushed to portray the shooter as a leftist. I mean, if you go on the New York Times, that's still a headline that Utah Governor Cox said he was radicalized by leftist ideology. They've provided no evidence of this, though.
Well, they didn't provide any evidence either that the student protesters were anti-Semitic.
Of course, right. Didn't stop them from saying it. Yeah.
This just perpetuates the fictions peddled by my former employer. It kind of breaks my heart in a way because it's just bad reporting. I mean, yeah, well, because it doesn't really matter, Katie. It's just it fits their agenda, whether it's true or not. I mean, from everything that, we don't know actually the motivation. Let's be clear. Right. But he comes out of that, and I don't know much about this world. I've only read a little bit about it, this kind of gaming world, which really strikes me as politically rather thin. I mean, it's more kind of nihilism. Yes. But certainly not one, I suspect, of any political depth. I don't think they're reading Rosa Luxemburg at night. So, but yeah, of course. And he will be characterized that way, even if it turns out he's not, because, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Right. And if they do correct it, it'll be too late, right? Everyone will have already internalized the idea.
Yeah, it's like the killing of the journalist
Shireen Abu Akleh.
Yeah, right. So Israel masters this. They peddle the complete fiction. I mean, remember, she was supposedly killed by Palestinians, and they showed video footage. And I think it was Beit Selam or somebody went and matched the footage, and it wasn't anywhere near where she was killed, etc. And then, like months later, when nobody cares, nobody notices. Yeah.
Let's turn to Gaza. Just recently, a UN Commission of Inquiry joined a host of other high-level experts to declare what Israel is doing in Gaza to be a genocide. Now, you have been covering this issue for a very, very long time, and it really impacted your own journalistic career because more than 2 decades ago, during the Second Intifada, you wrote a very important piece for Harper's Magazine, which you did while you were on vacation from your job at the New York Times as a New York Times correspondent, in which you documented the barbarism of Israel's occupation of Gaza, including, as you reported, killing children for sport. And now, of course, more than 2 decades later, we can't even count how many children the Israelis have killed inside Gaza since October 7th. And because you wrote that article, you became non grata at the New York Times, especially then after you then denounced the Iraq War and were soon forced to leave the Times. So your thoughts now, as yet another high-level body of experts declares Israel's assault on Gaza to be a genocide.
And to hear the rest of the interview, please go to usefulidiotspodcast.com.
And thanks again to Chris Hedges for joining us. His website again is chrishedges.substack.com.
Also check out his show on YouTube and check out the full interview with Chris at usefulidiotspodcast.com.
All right, that is our show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at usefulidiotspodcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.